Hello and welcome to one and all. So in today's class, we'll check out the what is the budget line and price line. So in the previous class, we have seen that, so if you remember the indifference curve, this is the indifference curve, isn't it? And the consumer can choose any one of the points on the indifference curve. So there are two things. One is out of this point, so each and every point represent different levels of combinations, and we know that all these combinations or all these points is going to give the same level of satisfaction to the consumer. So one thing the consumer has to design out of this 4 points, which combination the consumer has to choose. So that is one thing. And I already also explained when I was mentioning about the properties of indifference curve. So this is IC1, IC2, IC3. So all the points on indifference curve, each one of these indifference curves, they are going to give the same level of satisfaction. So obviously, the consumer will prefer the combination that is lying on IC3 compared to IC2 and IC1, any rational consumer, because we can see that IC3 is going to give more satisfaction than IC2 and IC1, because consumer can purchase more number of goods if he is on the IC3. But there are two things we have to check. One is whether it is possible for the consumer to move to IC3. Okay. So, and another thing is that even if it is in IC3 also there are different combinations. In IC3, which combination he would choose? So these are all the things the consumer has to know about it. And before I proceed, so this is what is called as an indifference map. Okay. So indifference map. So what we are finding here, we are finding different indifference curves drawn in one diagram, isn't it? So maybe IC1, maybe the consumer's income is like, for example, 15,000. And if the consumer income increases to maybe 25,000, he can purchase all those combinations of goods that is lying on IC2. If the consumer's income increases to 35,000, so he will still be able to purchase more amount of commodities, and he can shift to the higher indifference curve. That's why the property higher indifference curve gives more satisfaction than the lower indifference curve. So this is what is known as the indifference map. So indifference map, it's nothing but it is a set of indifference curve. A set of indifference curves. I mean, you can mention drawn on different income levels. So that is the set of, that is what is known as the indifference map. Okay. So there are two things we have to know. So either it is possible for the consumer to move to IC3, that is one thing. And also that if it is IC3, which combination he will choose. There are so many combinations in IC3 also. Which combination he will choose. So that's what we have to find out. So in order to know about that, we have to know the budget and the prices of, the budget means the money income of the consumer, and also what are all the prices of the commodities X and Y. So let us give an hypothetical example and see what are all the possibilities the consumer can have with a given amount of money income and with the given prices of the two commodities X and Y. Okay. So as I mentioned, so which combination or which combination and which indifference curve the consumer will choose depends on two things. So first one is money income of the consumer, and the second one is prices of two goods X and Y. Okay. So this is, as I mentioned, this is represented by what you call it as the budget line or price line. So let us take an hypothetical example and see what are all the possible combinations the consumer can afford. Okay. Now, let us assume. So example. So let us assume the money income of the consumer is rupees 100. So he is having a pocket money of 100 rupees and price of X happens to be rupees 20 per piece per unit and price of Y, let us assume it as rupees 10. So with this given restrictions, how many units of commodity X and how many units of commodity Y the consumer can purchase with his given amount of money income of rupees 100. You can remember the same thing we have seen under the law of equimarginal utility also. So under the law of equimarginal utility also, we have seen how the consumer can distribute his limited money income on two commodities X and Y based on this marginal utility that is measured on satisfaction measured in cardinal numbers. So this is also doing the same thing but without assuming the satisfaction in terms of cardinal numbers. Okay. So that's why every law is trying to provide the guideline to the consumer at what point you will get that maximum satisfaction. Only the method used is the approach is different. Okay, now let us take X units, Y units. So if the consumer spends his entire money income on commodity X, so he will be able to purchase 5 units, isn't it? And he will not be able to purchase any of Y. So hope you understand, because 5 into 20, the entire 100 rupees is spent on commodity X. So he will not be able to purchase any unit of commodity Y. Okay. And suppose if he is spending his entire money income on commodity Y, then he will be able to purchase 10 units of commodity Y. Isn't it? So because 10 into 10, you would have spent the entire 100 and he would not be able to purchase anything, any amount of commodity X. But our consumer, he wants the combination, he or she wants the combination of both. Indifference curve can never intersect either of the axis. Remember properties, because if the indifference curve touches either of the axis, one commodity is 0. But our consumer, the rational consumer, wants the combination of both X and Y. Now let us see how he can distribute between his limited money income on X and Y. Suppose if he purchases 4 units of commodity X, so that means for 4 into 20, he has spent 80 rupees on commodity X. So he will be able to purchase 2 units of commodity Y. So 80 rupees is spending on commodity X and 20 rupees is spending on commodity Y. So like that, there are we can make a combination. So if he purchases 3 units, that means he's spending 60 rupees on commodity X and he is left over with 40 rupees, which he can spend it on commodity. So 4 into 10, 40. So like that, if he purchases 2 units, then he is spending 40 rupees on commodity X. So he is left with 60 rupees. So he can purchase 6 into 10, 60 rupees is purchasing on commodity Y. And then finally, another combination. If he intends to purchase 1 unit of commodity X, he is spending only 20 rupees. So he's left with 80 rupees in his wallet. So he will be able to purchase 8 units of commodity Y. So 8 into 10. So now these are all the various combinations the consumer can afford with his money income and with the respective prices of X and Y. So the same thing if we are representing in the form of a graph. Okay. So the diagram of budget line and price line. So we are mentioning the same thing. X-axis, good X, Y-axis, good Y. So if he spends the entire money income on commodity Y, he will be able to purchase 10 units of commodity Y, isn't it? And if he spends his entire money income on commodity X, he will be able to purchase 5 units of commodity X. So now if you join these two, then we are getting a line. So mark it as PL. So now PL, this is the budget line. So PL happens to be the budget line or price line. Okay. So now the consumer can, so these are all the combinations. Here, the consumer can choose any one of the combinations that is lying on the budget line. He cannot choose a combination that is lying here. Let us mark it as K. So it is not possible for the consumer to choose point K because this is beyond his budget. So this point is beyond his budget. His budget line is not allowing him to choose any combination outside the budget line. So this is beyond his budget and he will not choose anything, let us mark it as T. So he will not choose anything here because when he can move to a higher what do you say, when he can afford to buy more units of commodity X and commodity Y, why would he choose a lesser number of commodity X and commodity Y? So both these are ruled out. This is ruled out and this is also ruled out. So what he can do, he can choose any one of the combinations that is lying on the budget line. Okay. Now if you put it, so what this budget line is representing, the budget line is representing all those combinations of two goods the consumer can purchase with this given amount of money income and with the prices of two goods. So that's what the budget line is representing. So put it in words, budget line or price line shows the various combinations of two goods which the consumer can purchase with a given amount of money income. That is, in our example, we took 100 rupees, isn't it? That is a given amount of money income. And at the relative prices of two goods. So we have taken 20 rupees and 10 rupees respectively for X and Y. So any of the combination, whatever I have mentioned in the diagram, I put it in the words. So this is what the meaning of budget line or the price. See, these are all important for your 2 marks. You have to mention correctly what the budget line means, what is the meaning of indifference curve, what is the meaning of marginal rate of substitution. Okay, that's why I'm writing it again. Even though I'm explaining, I'm writing it again. Okay, so this is the budget line. Now, based on this, our example, we can we can find out the budget equation. Okay, so that is so budget equation of the consumer. So the total money income I, that is how is distributing price of commodity X. Just now we have the formula, I mean the example we have seen, isn't it? Price of commodity X multiplied by units of commodity X plus price of commodity Y multiplied by units of commodity Y. So I represents the money income, PX and PY represents the prices of respective goods X and Y. Okay. So suppose if he spends the entire money income on commodity X, so that is I is equal to PX into X and Y is equal to 0. That is, if he or she spends the entire money income on X, okay, or alternatively we can write it as X is equal to I by PX, isn't it? I is equal to PX into X, so we can rewrite it, write it as X is equal to I by PX. And in the same way, alternatively, if the consumer spends its entire money income on commodity Y, then what will happen? I will be equal to PY into Y. In that case, X will be 0 and Y will be equal to I by PY. Okay. So this is what the budget equation. If he spends this entire money income on commodity X, X will be I by PX, entire money income on Y, then it is I by PY. Hope up to here it is clear now. Okay. Now let's go back to the diagram. So here what we are seeing that, I mean, this budget line is the PL. Now this is O. So this point is the O. Okay, O or 0. Okay, now we have to find the slope of the budget line. Okay, when you find the slope, how do we find the slope of the budget line as a derivative? So let me move all this. These are all not required now. So PL is the price line or budget line. And slope of the budget line or price line, how do we find the slope is equal to OP divided by OL. Okay. Now at this point, we already know this is I by PY. At P, it is I by PY. At this point, it is I by PX, isn't it? So OP by OL is nothing but I by PY divided by I by PX, which is equal to I by PY into PX. Sorry, let me write it properly. Into PX divided by I. So which is again equal to I by I into PX by PY is equal to 1 into PX by PY is equal to, so what is the slope of the budget? So therefore, slope of the budget line or price line is equal to PX by PY. Okay. So this is what the slope of the budget line or the price line. Okay. Up to here it is clear. I hope everything is clear to all of you. So now what do we now why do we have to find out the slope of the budget line? What is the importance of this budget line? Because based on this budget line only, the consumer is going to find this which combination of commodities he is going to choose, because his budget has to allow. So the slope of the budget line and the slope of the indifference curve, if they both are matching at one point, they both will equalize. So indifference curve represents the taste of the consumer, the taste and preferences of the consumer, without taking into account the budget and the prices of the consumer of the commodity. And this, whatever is taste and preferences, if it is matching with the budget line, then that point the consumer will attain the equilibrium. That point he will choose the combination. That combination he will choose, so that he will get that maximum satisfaction. Okay, because any point on the budget line or any point on the indifference curve is going to give the same level of satisfaction to the consumer. So when he can afford that kind of combination and it is taste also matches, then automatically he will be able to attain that equilibrium position. Okay, so the slope of the budget line is px by py. Slope of the indifference curve is, what is the slope of the indifference curve? So slope, this is the indifference curve, isn't it? So the MRS, this is the delta y by delta x, isn't it? So the slope of the indifference curve is represented by marginal rate of substitution, MRS xy, that is delta y by delta x. So if delta y by delta x representing the indirectly, delta y by delta x represent the taste and preferences of the consumer, and how much he is going to sacrifice 1 unit of x for 1 unit of y. And px and py is representing the budget of the consumer. So if the taste and preferences of the consumer matches with the budget of the consumer, at that combination, at that point, the consumer will get that maximum satisfaction. Okay, so now what we have to do, we have just to superimpose this budget line on the indifference map of the consumer. Okay, so moving on to the next part, consumers equilibrium under indifference curve. So as I mentioned, the consumer is said to be in equilibrium if his tastes and preferences matches his budget, his or hers. Okay, okay, so if those two are matching, then is said to be in the equilibrium. That is, a consumer is said to be in equilibrium with, given his tastes, prices of two goods, and what is the other one? The money income of the consumer and income. He purchases those goods in such a way, that is in such a combination, in such a way he gets the maximum satisfaction. Okay, then the consumer is said to be in equilibrium. So in order to find out that equilibrium, we have certain assumptions. So what are all the assumptions? Assumptions, I think all of you remember what is the meaning of assumptions. There are certain conditions as to be fulfilled. First condition is that consumer has an indifference map. So what is an indifference map? Set of indifference curve. That means he is having different indifference curve through which he can keep on moving higher and higher levels of combinations. So he is having a indifference map. I mean, he is able to arrange his preferences properly by depicting in the form of an indifference map. Okay, so he is having a indifference map. The second assumption, money income is constant. So why we are assuming this money income is constant? See, in our example, we have taken 100 rupees, isn't it? With that 100 rupees, we are finding on how many units of commodity X and how many units of commodity Y he can purchase. So suddenly this money income, if increases, then our calculation will go wrong, isn't it? So for that reason, we are assuming money income should remain constant. And also the prices of two goods, X and Y, also should remain constant. Okay. And apart from that, the other assumptions, the consumer is rational. Rational in the sense he wants to get that maximum satisfaction, and there are his taste and preferences remains same. These are all for the convenience. And there is one more assumption. There is perfect competition in the market. For the time being, just understand, perfect competition is a type of market where the prices sold by different sellers, prices of goods sold by different sellers do not change. So all the seller will be selling at the same price. So in order to have that, maintain the same price all over the market, we are assuming the perfect competition. So this topic you will come across in detail later. Okay. So in order to assume that the price don't change, we are assuming there is a perfect competition. So based on these assumptions, the consumer will attain the equilibrium. Okay. So in order to attain the equilibrium, there are certain conditions. I mean, in the sense that at which point the consumer will attain the equilibrium position. So condition of equilibrium. One I already mentioned, that MRS XY should be equal to the relative prices of X and Y. Okay. So there are two conditions. One is at the point of equilibrium, the budget line or price line must be tangent to the indifference curve. And the second condition is that MRS XY must be equal to PX by PY. So diagrammatically, now let us check whether at which point these two conditions are being satisfied. Okay, so let us check through the diagram. Okay, now this is X and Y, good X and good Y. First, what did we assume? We assume that the consumer has an indifference map. So this is the indifference map is having IC1, IC2 and IC3. So he can choose, any rational consumer would prefer IC3 because he can purchase more number of goods. But then we have to check whether his budget is allowing him. So now let us draw a budget line, find out the budget line. We already have the budget line, isn't it? PL. So let us superimpose that budget line on scope. So let us assume. So now draw it properly with a scale and this thing. Okay. So let us assume this is the budget line. Okay. Now this is PL, that is the budget line. Now these are all the different indifference curve. Okay. Now what we are finding out here, see, the consumer can purchase all these combinations on each and every indifference curve is going to give the same level of satisfaction to the consumer. Okay. And like this. So one thing what we are finding out is this is IC3 he cannot purchase because it's beyond his budget. So he cannot choose IC3. So let us leave out IC3. He can either choose IC1 or he can choose IC2. So in IC1, you can see there are 2 points. See, the budget line MRSXY must be equal to PX of PY. MRSXY is represented by the indifference curve. PX by PY is represented by the price line. So these at these 2 points, let me mark it as A and B. So in A and B, the budget line and the IC1, they both are equalizing. But then A and B, they are lying on the lower indifference curve, isn't it? So higher indifference curve gives more amount of satisfaction to the consumer. So when he can choose with the same budget, when he can choose a higher indifference curve, why would he choose the lower indifference curve? So IC1 is also ruled out. Now he has to choose the IC3 is ruled out, IC1 is ruled out. So he has to choose IC2. So at IC2, which point he will choose? So any combination on the IC2 is going to give the consumer this combination A is what do you say? C, E, D. So all these combination is going to give the consumer the same level of satisfaction. So which combination we have to know which combination out of the C, E, and D, which combination he will choose. So the first condition, the budget line, price line must be tangent to the consumer. So to the indifference curve. So you can see that at point E, the budget line is also tangent to the indifference IC2. So now our consumer will choose combination E lying on indifference curve 2 and purchasing, let us assume OM amount of good X and ON amount of good Y. So at this point, both these conditions are satisfied, isn't it? The budget line and price line is tangent at point E, and at the same point, the MRSXY is also equal to price of X divided by price of Y. So price of X, price of Y is represented by the budget line, as I mentioned. MRSXY is represented by the indifference curve. So at point E, the consumer attains the equilibrium position. So as I mentioned, as both the conditions are satisfied at point T, purchasing, equilibrium position, purchasing, OM units of commodity X and ON units of commodity Y. Okay, so point E happens to be the equilibrium position of the consumer. So this is how the consumer attains the equilibrium as per the indifference curve technique. So this technique, I mean, as I mentioned, every law is trying to provide the guideline at which point the consumer you will get that maximum satisfaction given the constraint of this budget. Okay. But one thing is indifference curve happens to be superior than the cardinal utility analysis because of this reason. We have here nowhere we measured the satisfaction in terms of cardinal numbers. So it is assumed to be, I mean, it is considered to be more realistic than the other laws which are based on the cardinal utility analysis. Okay. So with this, we have come to the end of the second chapter. That is the theories of consumer. So the next chapter deals with the demand aspects of the consumer, which I will take in my next class. Okay. So if you find this video useful, please like, share, and subscribe. If you have any suggestions or doubts, don't fail to mention in the comment box. Okay. So until my next class, take care. Bye-bye.